Hello everyone, hopefully you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting in just a second. Big long episode this week, so buckle up. Yeah. Get some popcorn, settle down, get a cup of tea or coffee, depending on who you are and where you are. Scotch, depending on the time of day.
Oh, the tweet fits. Great.
Lots to talk about, and most of it won't be Ignite. Because we don't want to talk about Ignite that much, because it's boring. No offense to anybody who handled all the Ignite announcements.
All right, the tweet is sent. Although I got to send it from my account.
Just been to Ignite. The new devices look great. Yeah, I guess I didn't think that they would have the new devices on the show floor there, but I suppose they did.
I'm almost ready. Just got to open the YouTube.
Am I drinking coffee or tea? I'm drinking tea, of course.
Yeah, Zach doesn't drink coffee.
I don't drink coffee. I'm not cool
Just
enough.
like I don't drink tea. I mean, I drink tea once in a while. I have that throat coat tea, which
yeah, but
helps
do you
my
drink
throat.
like, is it like herbal tea you drink, or do you drink actually like?
No, I went through a phase. I order stuff from what's a company called Stash Tea,
Sure.
and all they do is do super fancy, imported from China and India, and like all these like rare forms of black tea and green tea and all that. So I do that once in a while, but
Yeah,
it's not my go-to.
sure. Fair enough.
Okay, hold on. Let me get this. Oh, I gotta get the notes up. Come on. I have too many windows again. Okay, I am now recording.
I am now recording as well.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 288 for October 14th, 2022. Hey everyone, Gianni Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast, and we do have a big show for you folks today, as a lot has happened this week. We'll be starting off, of course, with the Surface event recap and everything that was there. And I still have some more reporting to do on this that'll be going up on the site that I'll kind of talk about. But I did a couple of interviews and spoke to a lot of people and got a lot of answers to questions. So we'll kind of go through that stuff as well. And I even got to see Android 12L on the Duo 2, which is a lot of fun. So we'll quickly talk about that. Zach can maybe give us an update on anything else he's heard, and including the ETA of when that is supposed to actually happen. Windows Next Valley, which we're thinking might actually be Windows 12 if they decide to do that. Some images leaked. Well, they were accidentally shown off by Microsoft, we think, or they were Easter eggs. Either way, Zach will break it down and talk about what's coming new to the UI of whatever they're going to call Windows. I think they're going to call it Windows 12 in 2024.
It would make sense.
It would, yeah. I mean, I think they're going to do that and get away from the just keeping it Windows 11 for everything. But yeah, pretty exciting stuff there. Ignite recap, which we'll keep brief. Because, and then there's just a bunch of smaller news things we're going to talk about. Facebook, aka Meta, launched the Metaquest Pro, which is a mixed reality metaverse headset. We'll kind of talk about its relation to what Microsoft is doing and the chances of its success. I picked up a Pixel 7, and I've had it for now about 24 hours. I'll share my thoughts about that because it's my first Pixel since the Pixel 4. And it's we'll go through that. And then just a kind of a big story coming out of China and the United States right now. United States put more sanctions on China, and it's really affecting the chip industry. So we'll talk a little bit about that because it could have huge ramifications, not so much for us, but for kind of the global market in China. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. And then maybe we'll go through some reviews too if we get time as well, plus thing of the week if we can think of one. Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I am glad it's Friday. This was one of the most hectic weeks ever, I think. I was left alone to cover all the events because our news editor, who would normally helped me, was away. That was a bit stressful, but we got through it. I think we did pretty well. our traffic tracking website that we have to see if Windows Central is doing well was very in the positive this week. So I'm pretty proud of the work we did. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well as well. So yeah, to recap what happened this week, and we probably won't even address it too much, but Nvidia launched the 4090 or is it
the new
4080?
graphics card, which is stupidly expensive.
Yeah, we have a full review of it up on Windows Central if you're interested in that. That was done by Rich Edmonds. So that was a massive thing as people were trying to get that. Amazon, of course, did its second Prime Day, which was really big as well. So hopefully, I picked up a couple of things, which I'll probably talk about in the thing of the week as far as what I picked up. Usually I resist stuff, but yeah, I'll go through that. And then, of course, there's the Surface event, which I guess we'll turn to next. Yes. So as Zach mentioned, he did a ton of writing. I think he did more writing this week than he's done in the last 2 months.
Wow, thanks.
Well, I mean, you really did. You did a tremendous job. And then I was on site in New York City where the actual event was the virtual event was happening for. And they had one in LA too, I believe. But yeah, I was there and they had the devices and everything like that. So I guess let's recap. Roughly speaking, Surface Pro 9 announced. I mean, it's everything we've been saying for weeks now.
There were no surprises.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple, but it was software related, right?
Sure, yeah.
Surface Laptop 5, Surface Studio 2 Plus, and a couple accessories. The surprises were some of the software, which we'll talk about as well. Let's start with the boring thing first. The Surface Studio 2 Plus, which is still a great device, but obviously not much has changed. So Zach, why don't you kind of recap on that?
Yeah, so the design is identical to the Surface Studio 2. The only real external differences on this device is that they've changed up the I/O on the back a little bit. So instead of there being an SD card reader and 4 USB-A ports, which is what the Studio 2 and Studio 1 had, there is now no SD card reader. They've taken that away and they've replaced it with 3 Thunderbolt 4 enabled USB-C ports, and they've also taken away 2 of the USB-A ports. So there's only 2 USB-A ports left on the back now. But other than that, the design is exactly the same. The bigger differences are on the inside. So it now ships with an Intel 11th Gen 11370H, which is the same chip that you can find in the Surface Laptop Studio. So it's not a terrible chip. It's certainly very performant. It's very capable, but it's not latest gen. It's certainly a last gen chip for the Surface Studio 2 Plus, which is very in keeping with the Surface Studio line. Every single Surface Studio ever has launched with a last gen chip at this point, and the Studio 2 Plus is no exception. And then on the GPU side, we have an Nvidia RTX 3060 laptop GPU, which is a huge performance increase over the 1070 in the Studio 2. But again, it's not exactly high end. It's not flagship level Nvidia, and it's certainly technically now last gen because the 4090 just came out, and the 40 series is about to begin rolling out in more models and SKUs in the coming months. So overall, the Surface Studio 2 Plus, not a huge sort of upgrade for the line as a whole. It's certainly just something to keep it sort of above water, above sea level. It's not groundbreaking. You know, I was hoping for a new design, thinner bezels, blah blah blah, but they didn't do any of that. The display is identical. I think it's now Dolby Vision certified, but that really doesn't mean much. It's still 60 hertz, still the same resolution. It's still a beautiful display, still one of the best displays in the PC space, but it's not 120 hertz. And I think for me, if it was 120 hertz, I would probably consider getting one. But because it's not even in the question for me this time. I'm not getting a Studio 2 Plus.
Yeah, it's and by the way, my video did freeze for a second there, but that was just a weird software thing. Yeah, you know, the 2 Plus is hard to get excited about. For people who need it, and that's the thing, right? Yeah. Most of us technically don't need a Surface Studio. Yeah, it's nice to have. I still have one, and it's an awesome computer, but it's so priced highly that it's a really specific tool for a specific audience. I think for that audience who actually needs its functionality, this is a pretty substantial upgrade. You know, with the things with the Thunderbolt ports is really nice. And a 3060 with the 11th Gen 45 watt processor, yeah, it's going to be much faster than the second Surface Studio 2. But yeah, it's hard to get excited over this in terms of it is a it's not only is it a generation behind, technically it's almost two generations
Yeah,
behind.
it's not great.
This 13th gen is coming out.
And what's more offensive is it's actually more expensive than the Studio 2 was when it launched. And there's only one config this time, so you can only get it with 1 terabyte storage and 32 gigs of RAM, which is fine. That's kind of what you expect, but you do pay $4,700 for it. No, sorry, $4,500 for it. Whereas that same SKU was, I think, $200 cheaper when the Studio 2 came out. So for 1 terabyte and 32 gigs, you could get that for $4,200 if I remember correctly for the Studio 2. But so yeah, it's a bit more expensive, and it's still a generation behind, though it is a big upgrade for Studio 2 users. So if you are a Studio a Studio 1 user or a Studio 2 user and you've been waiting for this will be a big upgrade for you. It'll be a large jump in performance and you will be happy with it. But if you was hoping for a new design or a 120Hz display or being able to use the Studio 2 as a monitor for another PC, that still isn't possible. And yeah, this is not a huge release for anybody else. Dan, your camera has stopped again.
I know, sorry. I'm trying to get the Nvidia Broadcast to blur my background, and yeah, the camera's being a little finicky. It should return.
There it is. Now you're now you're not centered for some reason.
I know. I'll fix that too. Let's see. There we go.
Oh, there you
go. Yeah, so there we go. Surface Studio 2 Plus. I guess the big story actually is going to be what comes next after this, because we're pretty confident, I think, that they're not necessarily going to continue this form factor as exactly as it is now.
I've seen a lot of people asking what was the point, why even release this if you're Microsoft. Does it even make business sense to release it? I think it's important to remember that this device was actually supposed to come out 2 years ago. This was they had intended to release a Surface Studio, I guess maybe they were going to call it 3 at the time, who knows, Surface Studio 3 with basically this exact chipset. I think maybe they would have had a 2060 instead of the 3060, because I don't think the 30 series was ready in the 2020. But this was supposed to come out in 2020, but then it didn't because of the pandemic. They actually decided to just hold off on that. And then they sat on it for way longer than I think they were expecting to. So now they're shipping it now. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the next one will have a different design. It might even be a different brand. You know, it will be the same team building it, but they might call it something else because the design will be so different. Maybe it doesn't lay down anymore, for example. I do fully expect them to do the whole Surface Book to Surface Laptop Studio transition where here's what it was before, here's what it is now. They're technically different, built by the same teams. A successor to the Book or the Studio 2 Plus, but it's not going to be called Studio anymore. That's kind of what I'm guessing is going to happen.
Yeah, I think they'll keep it so it lays down like a drafting board. The reason I think that is because Panos really focused on that when he was talking about the device. Like, he really showed off, and then he showed off how with Windows 11 now, when it goes down to the drafting board,
it adapts.
Position. Yeah, the OS actually adapts just like a tablet would. I don't think they did so much work on the hinge, and they're really kind of proud of that design, but they could probably do a lot more in terms of the base of it. I don't know. We don't know the sales, right? Obviously, they're only offering one SKU this time, which goes to tell you, they're not expecting a lot of purchases for this device. But there is precedent for what they're doing as well, because just a few years ago it was Surface Pro 7 Plus. And I said back, and I was like, this sounds like a carryover device for enterprise who want to stick with the current ports but have a more modern specs. And that's exactly what they did. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I guess let's go to Surface Laptop 5. That's a little bit more interesting. We do get a new color. We get they're calling it sage green or forest green.
Just sage.
Sage. Yeah. So it's a new green color, which, by the way, the green was so hard to photograph. It didn't matter if I was using my DSLR, the Duo 2, or even an iPhone. It threw off the white balance like crazy. I got to give you some of the video clips too, because even the iPhone couldn't handle the white balance on it. It was weird. It just really throws it off. Yeah, so 13, 15-inch. There is still the Alcantara version for the 13-inch in the Platinum, which is the OG version, which I'm still kind of happy about. But obviously, the Alcantara has been downplayed over the years, and that's continuing here. What are the other two colors? They still have the sandstone kind of?
Yeah, so they've still got Platinum, matte black, sandstone, and now the new color is sage. So they dropped ice blue. I think it was called ice blue, right? Or cobalt, whatever it was called before. That's gone. Yeah. And now it's green, sage green.
And other than that, it's the same chassis, but now it has Thunderbolt 4, which is
yay! Finally,
it's hard to get excited over it in 2022, but it's nice to have. It
Yeah.
does have Intel 12th gen processors. They are the U series, the 15 watts. These are very good processors. It's what I prefer in this form factor and this size. Again, we don't expect any difference with the Surface Laptop 15-inch. You're not going to get any more horsepower. You're literally just going to get a slightly larger display, a little bit more room. I don't even think you're getting more battery life. I don't think they're keeping the same batteries, I believe. So that's kind of fun. The big news here, of course, is what came out over the last couple of weeks. There's no AMD variants.
Yeah.
They kicked AMD to the curb, which, yeah, there's no way to spin this, right?
It's weird.
Like, you did get a quote. Do you have the quote in front of me?
Give me one. I was literally just bringing it up now. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, so the quote so I asked Microsoft, like, hey, so it's kind of weird that, the last 2 generations you did have an AMD version and this year you don't, and there's no explanation. Do you have anything to say regarding that? Because people will ask, and they got back with a sort of canned answer, but I'll read it here and you can decipher for yourself what they mean. They said, with every product and with the goal of delighting customers, we select the right components for the form, scenarios, and customer we envision. It is a deliberate process whereby we work closely with our partners to tune and perfect the overall experience. For this product, we are excited about the 12th gen processors from Intel. Built on Intel Evo platform, this chipset will help Surface Laptop 5 to achieve the perfect balance of style and power. This balance has consistently led to Surface Laptop being our most loved Surface device. So that's their statement regarding why there's no AMD. They don't even mention the fact that there's no AMD. They just talk about Intel. Right. Yeah, it's a weird choice because I know that they did certainly prototype Laptop 5 with AMD Ryzen 6000. I've seen the spec sheets internally for it. They certainly had them internally. But there must have been a decision at some point throughout the prototyping and development of this device where they decided, actually, let's not go ahead with the Ryzen version. Let's just stick with Intel this gen. Maybe they will return to AMD again in the future. Maybe they won't. I genuinely have no idea what the plan is regarding AMD and services going forward.
I think it's a couple of things that's coming to play. One is obviously they weren't impressed enough with the AMD processor, right? Because it could have gone the other way. They could have dropped Intel and gone with AMD if it delivered better battery life and better performance or better thermals. Like if it was better in some way, they could have just dropped Intel and just gone with AMD. So it could have gone that way. I think part of it is also they don't want to. The laptop market and the PC market right now is on a decline. Post-pandemic, a lot of people bought new computers. There will be a cycle there in a couple of years where people will want to upgrade, but that's probably not here right now. Maybe for some businesses, but most consumers are going to stick with their device for probably another year or two. You have that. You have a lot of concern in the economy over a recession that could or could not happen. There's obviously inflation that's already happening now that's affecting people and their spending. They're cutting back on spending. To offer the Laptop 5 with to have enough inventory for AMD and Intel in this current environment is risky. And we already know from the Duo 2 specifically how cautious they are in terms of stock. They don't want to build too much stuff and then have it left over. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle there is you combine it with the fact that the Surface Laptop 5 is not really a huge upgrade. It is in performance. I'll keep hearing this, that the 12th gen is really a significant bump in performance, and you really do feel it when you're using it. So it is faster. They made the display better. It's not 120 hertz, but it's got Dolby Vision and everything. This still has the same camera, which is a little bit of a shame, but it's using a little bit more software. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same laptop. It's not an exciting upgrade. And again, that device is probably due for a significant revision at some points, maybe for the next one. So I think when you combine all that together, they're anticipating smaller sales for this device. And to have it both with AMD and Intel would just be stretching themselves too thin in terms of being tricky for inventory, right? Because then consumers have to choose which one they want, and you got to do this also for business. You have to have a separate line for that. So I think that's the reason, but it still is significant that AMD isn't there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like both this and the Surface Studio 2 Plus have been sort of panned in the press and by people watching the event and people on Twitter and whatnot say they're super boring, blah blah blah. And to be fair, you can I think agree. I agree that they are certainly boring releases. But it's funny because the designs of them, although we were kind of hoping for them to be updated in regards to design, it's not like they are ugly products. They are still very beautiful devices. Right. And the Surface Laptop 5, we've said it before, it's a delight to use. It just feels great to use. The keyboard's lovely. Everything about it's really nice. I think the problem we have here is that because Microsoft, it's the same problem we had with the Surface Pro before they redesigned it. Because we've had this design for so long now, people are getting bored. It's a nice design, but just because it's nice doesn't mean it shouldn't ever be updated ever again. And we're certainly there with the Surface Laptop 5 now with its 5th generation. We've had this design for 5 years now. 5 years on the dot this year. And the studio's design we've had since 2016. So, it's a long time to have the exact same design with literally no modifications. There's been none. The bezels haven't been thinner on either. The only thing that really changed was they added a 15-inch version with the Laptop 3, and then they also added a metal deck for the 13-inch, which is the only real changes they've made. And even then, they weren't massive changes. Oh, and they added a bigger trackpad as well. So, very minor stuff here and there. And I think people are just, at this point, bored of the design and they want to see something new from Surface. Because that's what Dell, Dell does the same thing. They will sit on a design for a very long time, like the XPS line, and then they'll redesign it. And it'll be, here's the new XPS, and it'll be amazing. And then they'll sit on that design again for a long time. And I think we're at that point now where Surface needs to start doing that for the laptop and the studio.
Yep, I agree. I do find the complaint that... it's boring, kind of funny. It's not that it's a wrong analysis. Right. It kind of is. But there's two things that are coupled here, which is everybody expects every fall now Microsoft to do...
that's the problem,
like this big... like they're going to create a new device every single year. And I said this before. I was on Michael Fisher's Spotify Live podcast. Well, they don't call it a podcast. Spotify Live broadcast last night. And we're talking about this, and I mentioned how Microsoft doesn't feel any pressure to release things granted, Laptop 5 and the Pro typically get upgraded every year, but they would also rather just take their time on something, and they don't feel any particular, because they're not necessarily competing with their OEM partners. People like to say, oh, they're competing against Apple, but even there, they're really not. And I use this expression on, TD Ameritrade when I was doing an interview there, that they compete in mind share, not so much in market share. People do talk about the devices, but they don't really feel any strong way. So this is what we get, by the way. I'm not using Nvidia Broadcast because of the clicking. Now you hear that squeaking?
Yeah.
That's my dog who picked up her squeaky possum toy. She's obsessed with it, and of course now she wants to play. Oh my God. Wonderful. This is what I hear all day. I'm going to close my door.
All right, so as Dan does that, it is really interesting. I will say that, again, for the event in general, I did a poll on Twitter and I gave 3 options. I asked, did you enjoy the announcements? Did you like the new Surface announcements? And the options were, yeah, they're great, or I was underwhelmed, or I feel indifferent. And underwhelmed and feel indifferent were the most popular answers. And I think that's the first time I've really seen that from at least my following on Twitter, where usually everyone's super excited regardless of what they've announced. But this time it certainly was a much more negative response. I don't want to say negative, but it certainly wasn't an overwhelmingly positive response to the event. I saw a lot of people just complaining about the sort of pacing of the event. Also, the event just ends. There's no outro. It's just Panos is talking, and he's like, "Yeah, we think you're gonna love it." End. Which I thought was really strange. It's like they've really struggled to sort of nail these pre-recorded events. I said because they did it for Windows 11, the launch event. They did it for the Surface event last year, and now they've done it for the Surface event this year. And each one has been kind of wrong. They feel wrong, and they're not very engaging to watch in different ways. The Windows 11 one was just boring. They had really calm music playing in the background. It was Panos walking around being all somber and blah blah blah. It wasn't very fun to watch. The Surface event was of last year was a similar sort of occasion. There were no hands-on moments at all, apart from the laptop studio at the end, where it was a very forced, supposed to be on the fly kind of demo, but it was certainly scripted and very forced. And then this year it was just Just not a lot to really announce. Like the Studio 2 Plus segment was, I think, 2 minutes, and it didn't even get a sizzle video. It was just panels like, hey, here's the Studio 2 Plus. It can lay down. Thanks for watching. End.
I mean, yeah, exactly. And because of the name tells you everything you need to know, right? Pro 7 Plus also didn't get a video, right?
Right, and I think that's the problem. Should this event have been just a press release? Like, what was in it that needed it to be a video stream?
Yeah, I think, well, the Pro 9 is, which we'll turn
probably.
to
I think that may be the
interesting
driving
stuff.
reason for why this was an event in itself, because of the Pro 9.
Yeah, and it's that, and it's the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
But like I said, right now it's a bad environment to be launching a ton of products because everybody's cutting back on spending, and companies don't want to take the risk. So I think that really needs to play into that. I also do find it funny that every time, like, it was disappointing, it was boring, and like 90% of these people were never going to buy any of these devices
That's
anyway.
very true. Yeah.
It's like, come on, like, all right, say the Surface Studio knocked it out of the park and it was still $4,500.
Yeah,
Were
right.
you going to buy one? No, of course not. So what do you care? Like, it's not that big of a deal. These are products. It's a business. It's not entertainment, right?
Yeah.
It's not the next Netflix show that you got to binge watch. It's So I think that is really an important caveat. But let's turn to, Surface Pro 9, which was kind of the star of the show. And now they didn't change too much with this because they radically changed with Surface Pro 8 last year. But it is more radical of a change.
Yeah.
So the chassis looks like the Pro 8 in general terms, but they also merged aspects of it with the Pro X, which I'll talk about. And I just want to say, by the way, I was right. They did move the ports to the left side. And the device I saw weeks ago, which I probably shouldn't have, it was literally like next to me. I'm just like staring at it like, I'm like, that looks different. They moved the ports. Like, well, that's not a Pro X. Like, what's going on here? But it has vents. Like, I'm like, that's the Pro 9. And Zach couldn't confirm it, but I was like 90% sure. Like, that's what that was. So they moved. So I'll explain why they moved the ports too, because this is kind of interesting. So obviously the big thing is it's using also Intel 12th Gen U series processors. But as Zach has been saying for a while, they merged the line with the Pro X. So there's only like the 5G version is the one with the Qualcomm processor SQ3, aka Snapdragon 8cx Gen 3. And that's the only version you can get with 5G. So you can't get Intel on 5G, and you can't get ARM without 5G. And that's that specific model, which is fine. But in order to do that, they had to change up the chassis a little bit. So, for instance, to do 5G is very complicated in a laptop because, especially if you're doing sub-6 and millimeter wave, they require different antenna systems, and they're very complicated. So in order to accommodate those antennas, which it's funny, they spent a couple of years ago when they launched their first LTE Surface Pro, they spent so much time talking about how they blended the antenna into the chassis itself, and you could barely notice it, and had to invent a new material to do it. This time, it's not like that. Now it's got like stripes on the hinges.
It's not nice. I think it's ugly, to be honest.
Yeah, and like they didn't do anything to hide it, and I don't think they kind of could. It's the same reason why on your smartphones you have those bands too. It's very difficult to hide that. Not impossible, but difficult. But the way they had to structure the antennas going across the top and the sides, and then also the millimeter waves. There's a 1 millimeter wave on the right side, and then there's one behind the display itself, which is interesting. They had to move stuff around, so they had to move the ports over because where the ports were on the right side are now antennas. And so in order to do that, so they combined the chassis. So they're like, so the 5G version with ARM technically drove it. That was the base design.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Intel version. Yeah. So now you got 2 ports on the left side, Surface Connect higher up on the right side, and no headphone jack like the Pro X, which was kind of another controversial thing, but I don't think it is, right? People always just have to gripe about something, but when you ask Microsoft this, it's like, what about the headphone jack? People are going to ask. They're like, listen, people who are buying this device, this form factor, are usually cutting edge, leading heavy into technology. It's also obviously more expensive than your typical device. these people are very much more likely to be using Bluetooth headsets. And, I'm using earbuds right now, the Bose ones, which I still think are amazing. And there's no way I would use wired on a device anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I'll just use these all the time because even if you go wired, like on an airplane, like, yeah, but now you don't have active noise cancellation, which is the big rage, right? Everybody wants ANC in a device. So I get people are kind of upset about it, but I think it's true. People who are going to buy this have more money, and they're going to be very more likely to have earbuds, which are just so ubiquitous these days. Everybody has earbuds, and everybody's making earbuds. It's kind of crazy. So I think that's true, and they did use that space for other things like those antennas. The antennas kind of go in places, and that drives where they can kind of stick things, and so that's part of the design. I think they expanded the battery a little bit too.
I'll say it is quite interesting. Essentially, although it looks the same as the Pro 8 on the outside, it is essentially a redesigned product. It sort of merges the Pro X layout with the Pro 8 layout to create this new thing. Because like you mentioned, the ports have moved, so instead they're now where the Pro X used to have them. 2 ports on the left and then the Service Connect on the right. But then they've also moved the volume and power button. Instead of them being on either side now, they're back on the top where they used to be on the Surface Pro 7. Yeah, so it's like they've fixed it. I think because this is very uncharacteristic for the Surface Pro line, where 3 years in a row now they've changed the design. They've moved ports around, and previously they were used to say things like we can't do changes that often like that because our enterprise customers have accessories and things like that connect to it, like docks and whatnot, and moving the ports is a much bigger deal to them than it would be to a normal person. But I think the reason why they've done it so often in the last 3 generations is because of that Surface Pro 7 Plus product, which exists only for enterprises, really. They were like, hey, listen, this product's going to be supported for a long time. Keep buying this if you don't want anything to change. The next few years, we're going to be refining a new design, which may change between generations, which is kind of what happened with the Surface Pro originally between the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, and Pro 4. Only until they got to the Pro 4 where that design was finally settled upon. And I think maybe we're seeing the same thing here with this new design where they're moving things around, they're trying things out, and they're almost sort of settled at a final design. I think next year will be the perfect refinement of it, and then we'll have that design for the next 5 years. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree there. But you're right. I mean, internally, this device is completely redesigned. Yeah. And people won't appreciate that if you just look at the exterior. I also found out that the ARM version, despite being fanless and sharing a lot of the same chassis, isn't drilled out where the vents are.
So why does it have the black line? What is that?
There's no black line.
Yeah, well, if you look at the device, like it looks like there's a gap between the back panel and the edge of it.
So that's just part of the chassis design. Like when they make it, it has like a fin and then the base of the unit, and then in between there is where they put the vents.
Yeah, but on the Pro 9 5G, they're just not holes there. They've just left it blank.
It's just not holes there. And so I asked about that, and it's actually a good explanation. One, it's extra effort to drill out those holes, which they don't have to now do. The other thing is they said it's better. It seals the device better. It's a less ingress, you're not going to get dust and potentially water or other things in there, which could of course damage the device. So it's better protected. And they also said that it doesn't, having the holes wouldn't improve the thermals at all.
No, yeah. I guess the question I have is why do they leave it black? Why not just paint it silver like the rest of the device?
I don't know what you're talking about black.
Well,
I don't.
I can't. If you look at the device, like where the vents are on the normal Pro 9, there's like a black line. That's where the vents are. On the Pro X 5G or the Pro 9 5G, that line is still there. It's not one solid piece. It's like there's a slight groove where they've just not drilled out the holes. I'm just wondering why they didn't paint that silver, and I think I know why. I know the answer. It's because the Pro 9 and the Pro 9 5G are the same thickness, and if they were to blend that where the vent would be with the rest of the chassis, the Pro 9 5G would look thicker, because that line also serves a purpose of making the device look a bit thinner, and that would go away if they painted it. So I think that's the reason why they've left it so it looks like there's a vent on both when there isn't.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just to bring the production to similar, make it easier for during the production. Yeah. Trying to think what else. Oh, so in the big thing with the 5G, this is what's really interesting. Besides being ARM and getting 3.5 more hours of battery life, and being cooler, not requiring a fan at all, and I forgot to ask if the i5 version has a fan. I forgot to do that. But the because it's ARM, it has an NPU, a neural processing unit. And now we've had that in the Pro X before, and that's what drove that feature where it would auto adjust your eyes to make it look like you're looking at the camera, but you're looking at the display. So that was the first instance of it. The difference here is a much more powerful NPU, and now they're really kind of building something into Windows where it does. I forgot what they call it, Studio Effects, I believe they called it. Windows Studio Effects. And this was incredible. I did post some photos, or a photo of me doing a selfie kind of thing on using the camera, and it is one of the, if not the best camera I've ever seen on a device. I say for desktop as well. Now, if you're watching this video podcast, you'll notice behind me it's blurred out, and I've talked about this before. I'm using the Nvidia Broadcast app, which does that. It's using AI as well, and it's one of the most advanced versions to do it. But the way to do it, you need a GPU. So I'm using a 3080 in my device, which is powering it, which means this technology it's not really available for ultrabooks. You can do it in a gaming laptop, but you're also going to be using a lot more power. As everybody knows, GPUs are very power hungry. The alternative, you can kind of like, I think there's a hack where you could force it to use your CPU, but then that runs into the same problem. And you're going to see this trend in the industry where you offload things to separate processors. So the CPU, the central processor, is doing the task you actually want, while in the background, this other processor, which is purpose built for these tasks, is much more efficient. So they have that chip in there, and now it can blur the background. And there's actually two blurring options. There's like a general blur, which kind of goes like, makes it really blurry. And then there's another one called portrait, which makes it less intense and looks a little bit more natural. It also auto adjusts your eyes, just like the Pro X did. The quality of the image is just really nice. The colors and everything like that look great. And then there's also this, what do they call it? Center voice, or
voice clarity and voice focus.
Okay, voice focus, that's what it was. So the mics on here now also do what Nvidia Broadcast does, which is it uses AI to filter out background noise. Now, Intel has some similar technologies as well, and you can find this in some Intel laptops, but what Microsoft has done is way better, in my opinion, with this Qualcomm hardware. So it filters out. You can be like, they use an example they recorded while having a bag of chips and crunching it and stuff like that. And there was some clipping. It's not perfect, but in general, background noise, like it's pretty solid in terms of removing everything. So if you're a person who does a lot of video calls and is very mobile, the Pro 9 5G makes a ton of sense. And I'm very excited about trying it out. That's not to slight the Intel version, which also looks great, but the camera quality it doesn't do any of this stuff really. So it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few differences between the ARM version and the Intel one.
Yeah.
Another one being the choice in colors. One of the big things with this generation is that they're finally introducing more than just silver and black. We now have sapphire, which is a blue, and forest, which is a shade of green, and they look great. And there was also a limited edition Liberty one that they announced as well, which was designed in partnership with Liberty London, and I believe you can only buy them within the physical Microsoft stores, because I haven't seen a pre-order page for them on the Microsoft store online. But yeah, and that one's very interesting. It's like a very vibrant blue with a laser etched sort of pattern in the back of it, and it's got a matching type cover as well. It's a very, very different sort of design for the Surface Pro.
There's another cool thing about it, which is when you snap the type cover to it, it downloads via the Surface app specific wallpaper for that.
Nice.
Which is just a cool trick that they did.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, the original Surface RT and Surface Pro did that with Windows 8. If you docked one of the colors of the type cover, the Windows start screen would change to match that type cover. That was seen for one generation, then it disappeared forever.
I think that's here again too. I don't know. I could tell you that the green and blue Pro 9s have matching wallpaper.
Yeah, that's right.
So they have the bloom. And not only is it green, like the bloom part, but it's like tinted green. Mm-hmm. The whole wallpaper is tinted green, which again threw off my white balance. But yeah, so the reason they're able to do colors now is because of last year's change. They went to anodized aluminum, and so now they don't have to paint the devices, so they can do this deep into the metal itself. and do these colors. And so I asked Microsoft, like, do you think you could be doing more of this, especially the partnership with like Liberty? And they're like, they're looking into it. Like they mentioned the word drops, which is the hipster way of like, shoe companies will do a drop of a special limited edition shoe for a little while. And you can think of the Liberty version as that. It's basically a drop. I asked how many how limited is limited. They wouldn't give me an answer. And I think the reason is, again, bringing in this idea that the economic environment right now is pretty rough. They're not going to probably produce a ton of these.
Right.
But they also don't want to set a number. They don't want to be like, oh, we got 3,000 and not sell them.
Right.
But they also don't want to say 500 if demand is really high.
And these weird design partnerships are always weird because this Liberty model will be more expensive than the normal one. You'll configure it exactly the same, but it will be more expensive because it was designed in partnership with a big designer brand known as Liberty in this case.
I wouldn't be surprised, and I forgot to ask that. I would assume there's probably only one SKU you can get.
Yeah, I would think so too, but it will be more expensive than the equivalent SKU with a different color because it wasn't designed in partnership with somebody. It's the same thing with the Apple Watch, right? The Apple Watch Hermes or whatever it is always way more expensive, even though it's the exact same thing. But because it was designed with a design company, they charge more for it. Yeah,
so I think if these are successful, we'll see more of this in. Maybe even in the Pro 9's, existence, but maybe with the Pro 10, they could do more of it. And this gives them the flexibility. So to be clear, and the Liberty version is really striking. From a distance, it just kind of looks blue, but when you get close to it and look at it, you can see the patterning on the back, and it's just super gorgeous because it's laser etched. So it's extremely precise, and you don't really even feel it too much. It just looks great. In terms of launch, UK, US, and Japan initially. And then it's probably going to come to other markets. But again, I think they're really going to test the waters about demands and to see how it goes. And so that's the Pro 9. I think they look great. Like, I'm actually really excited about it. I think that I wrote last year that the Pro 8 is basically everything kind of coming together finally in a device. Although they didn't deliver the variable refresh rate for Surface Pro 8, I do have a question for Microsoft is trying to answer that for me, so hopefully I'll get that answered. The Pro 9 does have variable refresh rate. I confirmed. I saw it in there.
It would be so funny if Microsoft thought the Pro 8 had that update rollout and they just forgot.
Yeah, I don't think that happened, but yeah, hopefully I'll get an answer. But yeah, so it'll shift between 60 and 120 hertz depending on what you're doing. If the image is static, it'll be 60, and then if you're scrolling, it can go to 120. And Edge even has this feature in flags where you can enable that to make it even smoother. But yeah, the display also has Dolby Vision Iq. So this is interesting. So Dolby Vision is a proprietary version of HDR, and it's Dolby tuned, and a lot of movies are tuned to be Dolby Vision with the metadata in the film itself. And then the display is calibrated and matches their specifications. And when you merge those two, you get a consistent HDR experience that the director, movie makers want people to experience. So that's regular Dolby Vision. And you can find that in a lot of laptops now, a lot of premium laptops. Lenovo has really gone big into it. And you couple that with Dolby Atmos, which is the 3D spatial sound, which also makes a massive difference. So you have stereo speakers, but now they simulate 3D. And when it's done right, it's really enveloping. Like, it really feels like the sound is just broader than it is. And what makes, of course, the Surface Pro 9, you have the speakers on, facing you, which is going to be a really good audio experience. But they're using Dolby Vision IQ, which is a new iteration that came out around 2020, and it's mostly found on TVs. I've actually never seen it in a laptop or a PC before. What it's doing is it's using not only there's an ambient sensor, but I think there's a secondary sensor that does what do they call it on iOS, where it tunes the colors of the display?
True tone.
Oh, True Tone. So they have a sensor that detects the light coming and then adjusts the display. I actually kind of don't like this feature. In my HP laptop, the Dragonfly G3 also has it. So some laptops have this. You could turn it on and off, of course, but it just adjusts the color. So they're using that sensor. So you can do that on Pro 9. You can have it auto adjust based on the lighting. But that same sensor will then use that info with the HDR info to match, again, the metadata in the video file, the video you're watching, and give even more accurate HDR representation. So these devices are going to be like really nice for, watching movies and this kind of thing. I'm not sure if too much got updated with the pen. I think they did talk about the G6 processor, though.
I think that's just rehashing of old stuff. I don't think there was any actual changes to the pen or how it works with the device, sadly.
Yeah. But, I'm trying to think what else there was. Nothing changed with the type covers outside the kind of new colors. But they look gorgeous in person, man. Like the blue is really just striking. Yeah. They did such a nice job on these.
I'm just so sad that the colors are only available for the Intel one. Like I pre-ordered the ARM one, but you can only get it in platinum. You can't even get it in black, which was the Pro X's original design, original colorway, and they took it away for this generation, which is kind of sad. But and
the reason they did that, of course, is demand.
Yeah,
as much as I love 5G in my devices, or even 4G if you don't have it in your area, it's clearly a minority of users who are going to seek that device out. And so, again, they don't want to. If they see high demands and people really want it, I'm sure they'll eventually do a second color for it. But I don't think we're going to see that.
Assuming they keep with this whole color thing with the next generation, and each year's got slightly different colors, like the iPhone, for example, I hope next year they do a red one. I'm buying a red one straight away. I love red technology. Red iPhone. I want a red Surface Pro to match.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I like to see them bring back the burgundy color.
Or burgundy, yeah. Anything in the sort of red sphere is something I want to buy.
Yeah, and they can do that now with the anodized the aluminum, which is pretty wild. Yeah. So I'm very excited about the Pro 9. I don't know which one I'm reviewing, by the way. Like, we're just discussing this before the podcast. Microsoft hasn't talked about it. I don't know if they're going to send the Intel version. Oh, man. I just opened the door to let the dog in because I figured she'd be done. Now she got her possum.
Nice. All right, well.
Sorry. You just scared the cat away. Okay. I got to take you. This is her possum, by the way, that she absolutely loves. And it's her little stuffy. But I'm sorry. You'll get it back after the podcast, sweetie. Yeah, so I don't know if they're going to send the Intel version, which I want to try because of the performance. And, of course, test the battery life. And the colors, obviously, is going to make great photos and for selling it. But then the 5G version is, well, it's 5G. And I was just harping on the camera, which is like the best camera I've ever seen in a device. And they really were talking about it a lot. Like, I would think they would also want coverage of that. So I'm going to try to get both, but I don't know what their review plans are for that.
Right. We need to quickly breeze through the rest of the announcement because we got a lot to talk about and we're already almost 50 minutes into this episode. Other things announced at the event, there were two more hardware announcements. There was a new Microsoft Audio Dock and new Microsoft Presenter Plus accessory. The Audio Dock's a really interesting one. It's a $250 speaker that has a PC dock built into it. So you can plug in your laptop, plug in a monitor to the dock, and use it like you would, say, a normal Surface dock, except it now has a speaker built into it. Now, Microsoft says it's good enough for listening to music as well as Teams conferencing. You know, it's certainly designed for Teams. It has a Teams button on it and conferencing buttons and stuff. But it has just a premium speaker built into it. So it's a very weird product, but, there it is. It exists, $250. I think it ships the same day as the other services, which is nice. And then there's the Microsoft Presenter Plus, which is a Teams remote. So you can use it to control PowerPoint slides, for example. You can mute and unmute your mic, and it allows you to walk around and do all that stuff without having to be sitting in front of a computer. So pretty cool. And that goes for $79 as far as I remember. And then the other air quotes announcements were about Windows 11. So they did have a segment in the event where they talked about Windows 11. They sort of did a recap of 22H2, tabs and file explorer, blah, blah, blah. But then they also did throw in a couple of small announcements in there. For example, the snipping tool is getting a screen recording feature soon, which is really nice. Apple TV and Apple Music is coming to Windows next year. I believe they're on Xbox now, but there'll be Windows apps coming next year, which is really nice. And was that everything for Windows? I can't remember.
You mentioned that the Photos integration.
Obviously. Oh, yes, and then iCloud integration is coming to the Photos app in Windows 11, so you'll be able to see all your iCloud stuff within the Windows 11 app, which is pretty cool.
and they had that there and were able to demo it live, which is wild.
Yeah.
So they're very open about it. Nothing was like beta there. It was
Sure.
cool. It wasn't like, so they gave me the iPhone and I could snap a photo and then watch it sync live, right? And then it would show up on the PC. And what's cool about it is it can go into like all your photos, but there'll be a little icon in the upper right-hand corner showing that it came from iCloud versus the OneDrive stuff. So you can see them separated. It looks really nice. This was a huge surprise announcement. I don't think any of us anticipated it, especially because Apple typically doesn't like working with Microsoft. But this is an amazing way to be able to sync your photos and view them just like you do with OneDrive. Now, it'd be nice, of course, if Google jumps on the boat here as well, but we don't know. And Apple TV and Apple Music, I don't care about Apple Music too much, but having an Apple TV app, yeah, that's pretty wild. I'm pretty excited about that. This is for Windows, and they're going to appear in the Microsoft Store, which is another feather in the cap for the Microsoft Store, which is increasingly just doing really well for them. And so I think this is a pretty big deal in terms of adding legitimacy to their ambitions in the store. I think this is just really good for anyone who uses an iPhone, who has been kind of traditionally a secondary, user on a Windows PC because of the way Apple treats things. And I don't necessarily blame Apple, but this at least helps make those who have an iPhone but prefer using PC life a little bit better. And I think that was a really cool move.
Microsoft also announced a new app called Microsoft Designer, which is an AI-driven graphics design app. So it uses DALL-E 2 technology by OpenAI, which was like, took the internet by storm earlier this year, where people were just typing in keywords and it was creating art and generating images that were kind of scary or creepy and stuff. This technology is being built into this new designer app, so you'll be able to load up the app, create a new project, and it will ask you, hey, what do you want to see? I type in, for example, a note waterfall with birthday balloons, and it will generate an image of a waterfall with birthday balloons, and you'll be able to take that image, edit it, do your own thing with it, and create a graphics design project around it. So that's pretty cool. That's launched in private preview now, or at least a very limited preview, and it will be rolling out to more people over time. They also announced that same technology is coming to Bing, so you'll be able to search. You can do an image search on Bing, but now you'll be able to do that same thing, but create your own image. So if the image you're looking for doesn't exist, you can use Bing to create that image.
This is huge.
It's great. It really is great.
I mean, DALL-E 2 is considered to be the best photo generating AI. I believe it's definitely one of the best, if not the best.
Yep.
And Microsoft, I forgot what the news was, if they either invested or they made some partnership with DALL-E. That was announced a little while ago, and this is, I think, the result of it. But integrating that directly, because right now you have to go to like the DALL-E 2 website, you have to sign up. You can sign up with a Microsoft account though, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And but you only get like 50 samples or something like that that you can do. And then I think they're going to generate money. So I don't know if there's limits with the Microsoft Bing search. I don't think so. But it's going to be pretty cool to have that just built in and that ease of access. Way more people are going to be able to use it now because I would venture to say most people have never heard of this, right? Outside of the tech sphere. Most people don't have any idea that this technology exists. And this is going to really start to bring it into the mainstream. And this technology has a ton of potential. And Microsoft clearly sees that. So
I thought it was really interesting in the announcement for this is that they took a second to sort of write about and highlight safety and making sure the AI doesn't return rude results or something that would break their terms of service or terms and conditions. And the reason I think they mentioned that is because of the Tay AI. So if you remember Tay AI, that was Microsoft's first attempt at sort of AI on social networks. But the thing with AI is that they learn. You can program them, you can train them based on responses that they receive. So everybody was just typing rude things into Tay AI, and then Tay AI turned into this sort of hateful creation that would just say rude things to people. So Microsoft were highlighting that we've trained this AI, we've given it filters and stuff, so the things you type in, it won't return an inappropriate response, which is probably for the best. You're muted, Dan.
I knew that. Sarah's asking, can you edit the images that are created? Not directly, but you can refine them. In terms of
regenerate.
It's very. Yeah, you regenerate it, and you can do very specific word choices for context, and it'll work on that. And then you can kind of go dig deeper into it, generating more options and stuff like that. And then, of course, you can download, save, and then edit it yourself. But yeah, it's really wild technology. I think a lot of people are going to have fun with it. And I think it's just great that Microsoft's embracing it and just bringing it to the masses in this way. So the software stuff was actually all really surprising, really interesting. I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah. So we should move on and talk about your hands-on time with Android 12L for the Surface Duo, because that was, although not in the event itself, they did have it in the hands-on time after the event where Dan was at. So Dan, how is Android 12L?
Yeah, it's great. When I first went into the room, it was pointed out to me that, like, oh, by the way, the Duo 2 over there has Android 12. And so, like, everybody was, like, looking at the new surfaces.
Right.
And I run right up to the Duo 2 and was there for, like, 15 minutes just playing with this thing. So, yeah, they had it was open. It was it's running Android 12L. Again, no supervision. There was no, it's beta. There's some things maybe, not working. It was just like, yeah, go at it. And I was able to just do whatever I wanted with it. And which goes to tell you how far along it is in terms of development, right? Yeah. We're in the very final stages here. They're doing, I think, the final self-hosting, looking for any show-stopping bugs before it goes to validation. And it's nice. Like, first of all, it did feel fast, but of course this was on a clean device, like a out of the box new one. So I only spent a few minutes with it. So, but everything looked and felt very smooth, right? It certainly wasn't a regression, which is good. And I don't think we'd expect that, but things felt almost, I don't know if I want to say even better, but if you ask me my initial impression, yeah, it felt faster, but we'll see. Everything's been kind of what Zach's already talked about. So when you pull down the notification shade, it's very different now, and it's nicer. They use a translucency effect, like to blur out the acrylic, I believe they call it, to kind of blur out the background. The settings have all new icons in it, which I believe match Windows 11. Even the news feed, when you slide it over, also looks very much like the feed on Windows 11. So, like, I'm trying to think what else there was. The settings, notifications. I didn't get to try the pen thing, but I was told that is there. That's going to be a thing too. And when I asked about, like, so what's the deal here? They're like, and it's exactly what Zach said, that they're configuring Android and designing it so that it looks more like Windows 11 to bring those closer together, which goes again to show that Microsoft is heavily invested in Android, right? They wouldn't go through all this effort if, like, Duo 2 is the last device and that's it, we're done with making Android phones. They're going hard in this, and I think they'll continue to do this as they see fit. But, that's not trivial work to do to make it customized, but it felt great, it looked great. Oh, there also was, of course, the accent colors. I forgot there were definitely 4, but I forgot if there were more, because the way Android 12L works is like it shows 4, and then you can slide them over, and then there'll be 4 more. So I forgot if there's a little arrow there.
There isn't, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so you get 4 choices, but then there's also the Wallpaper Accent, which then uses your wallpaper, I believe, to match the
so there's technically 8 choices, but 4 of them are based on your wallpaper, and then 4 of them are just sort of stock colored ways.
Right. So the wallpaper one, I believe how it works, it shows like a circle with the 4 squares.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has like 4 different colors in it that are like a pattern based on your wallpaper, and you can choose which one you prefer, and it'll do that, which is a really cool feature, but that's part of Android. So, but that's going to be there. It's going to give more people choices. Jez should be happy that there is red. Yeah. There is a red color there. So that should make him pleased, because that's the one thing he's been asking for. Yeah, I don't know. It looked great. I'm very excited about it. In terms of ETA, when it's going to come out, obviously I asked, but they said, within this year, basically. Right. And the reason they do that is because they can't give a date if it needs to go to validation. Yep. You don't know how long it's going to take for validation. They're also doing that late stage testing. They may find a bug at the last minute that needs to be fixed. So they're not going to go, it's coming out on this date, only to have a bug, or maybe Google doesn't validate it in time and like they miss it, then everybody's mad. Yeah. So they're giving themselves some space, but it's coming real soon, folks. Like I said, they wouldn't let me just have at it, with no warnings. They're like, oh, don't look at that thing, don't touch that. They were just like, yeah, no one even watched me. I was just doing whatever I wanted with it. So
what you say about the self-hosting thing and like almost being final is true, except for I believe they now have a final build as of this week, or earlier this week they have a final build of Android 12, which makes sense because as you said, they let you add it. It was basically final with the build you had, and I think they were only a couple builds away from it being final. So yeah, as I'm told, the Android 12 release has now been finalized. They're now testing that and they're putting it through its paces, and it needs to be verified with Google. Once that happens, it will be good to go. And I'm hearing they officially have said later this year, which does make it sound like it's at least a month away. I'm hearing it's still this month. It could be as soon as next Thursday. I don't want to give an exact date because they might not.
This is the issue.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But before the end of the month is what they're really aiming for. So fingers crossed they are actually able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this is how all this stuff works. There's a window they would like to hit that they're aiming for, but software development's hard. And this is one of the more substantial updates. It's not only a total version upgrade, but it has all these UI changes that deviate from stock Android that I think are really interesting. So I think and this is coming, to be clear, Duo 1 and Duo 2, right? It's coming to both of them. Whether they release the same day, I don't know. Again, I bet they're aiming for that. But things could happen, right? So we'll see what goes on there. But yeah, this is great news for Android and the Surface Duo 2 users. And I think it's it's a sign that Microsoft is committed to doing this and will have a third device at some point. It's just questions about what that shape that takes, basically. So neat stuff. All right, you want to do the Ignite recap?
Before then, let's talk about. Well, I guess this was part of Ignite, so I guess this is technically the Ignite segment. Okay. But we're going to sort of highlight a very small segment of Ignite, which was accidental as far as I'm aware. It happened during, I think, a split-second cutaway as they were talking about something completely unrelated. But weirdly, people watching the Ignite conference, because I certainly wasn't watching it, spotted a cutaway to what looked to be something that wasn't Windows 11. It was a picture of a Surface Studio running Teams, but then if you look, around the app of Teams, it's the shell's different. It has a floating taskbar, it has the weather in the top left, has the system tray icons in the top right, and it has this sort of weird sort of circular search bar floating in the top middle of the display. And people sort of put that on Twitter, and some people started asking me and going, hey, did you see this? This is kind of weird looking. And normally I would have looked at that and gone, oh, some silly mock-up that was being thrown around internally that wasn't supposed to go live was accidentally put to the event. Or maybe there was a miscommunication between the design teams and the mock-up teams and blah, blah, blah. And I wouldn't have thought anything of it really, except I've seen the prototype UI of that caliber before. When I started hearing about Next Valley months ago now, I was hearing these sort of design guidelines and ideas were being considered for it. So when I first saw that image, I was like, that's not just any old sort of mock-up. That's an actual prototype for the next version of Windows. So I wrote that up yesterday and people jumped on it and stuff. And I even recreated the image because the actual shot in the Ignite conference is very low quality. You can't see much. So I was able to use my powers to to make a version that allows you to see what the elements are sort of suggesting in a lot more detail. And basically the TLDR is this is a design UI prototype for the next version of Windows. This is what they are exploring and considering for the UI for Windows Next Valley. Now, there's a couple of... I'm choosing my words very carefully there because none of this is confirmed. It's not set in stone. These are explorations. Right. These are prototypes. And this happens a lot. They did the same with Windows 8 back in the day. They didn't just create one design and go, right, we're going with that. They created lots of different designs, and it took a while for them to settle on what the final product was going to look like before they started committed to code. And the same will happen here with Next Valley. But what's really interesting to me is how this even got into the Ignite showcase to begin with, because this is a confidential design prototype. These things getting out is bad for Microsoft. I know a few people were like, was this really an accidental leak, or did they do this on purpose to get feedback? And I can see why people would think that. I don't think that's true, only because this is the era of Panos Panay, who loves secrecy and doesn't want anybody to see anything until it's ready to be announced. So this sort of flies in the face of that whole idea and mindset. Secondly, this is bad for the designers because now they're getting feedback on a design that isn't finished, and they can be influenced by the negative criticism that has started to arise because this is an unfinished prototype design. Lots of people looking at it go, oh, it looks just like macOS, looks terrible, Fit's law doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. Lots of complaints and criticisms from people who haven't used it because it doesn't exist yet. And so that's going to influence the designers. So they're now going to, when they go back to work on Monday, they're going to be sitting down, right, what's next for our design? They're going to be like, well, a lot of people were saying that this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And it's going to cause problems. So this is why these leaks aren't beneficial to Microsoft. And I think the reason this even got out is because I'm guessing there's a prototyping website where the people who make these mock-ups of apps and stuff can just pull a version, like can pull an image of the Windows desktop, and then put their own app on top of it. And I'm guessing the person who made this one for Teams just pulled something that they didn't realize what it was, and that's how it ended up in the Ignite showcase. Normally, it would have been fine if Microsoft bloggers didn't exist and weren't able to sort of look at that and go, oh, I've seen that before. That's the thing for the next version of Windows. But sadly, I exist, and that's what my job is. So. Yeah, the next version.
I was going to say, it's kind of funny hearing the leaker guy, the guy that is all stuff defending Microsoft as to why they don't leaks. But
they need to vet their keynotes better, because if somebody who has their head screwed on would have seen that and gone, that cannot go into the keynote. But nobody saw it, and we saw it, so there you are. But yes, that is the exploration they're going for. It's a floating taskbar similar to the macOS dock with system elements running along the top. And now I've seen multiple variations of this sort of design concept, including a version where the elements on the top aren't just floating there, they're housed in a sort of menu bar like on macOS again. The goal of this design, as far as I'm aware, is to create a Windows UI that's equally capable and equally usable on every kind of input device: touch, keyboard, mouse, pen, whatever. Previous versions of Windows have either swung one way in too far in one direction or too far in the other. Windows 8 was too touch-centric. Windows 10 was too mouse-centric. Windows 11 was the first one to try and find a balance, but it's certainly still a mouse-centric OS. With this next design, if they go with it, again, none of it's set in stone. The idea is that it works great with keyboard and mouse, and it works great with touch. And I think you can really see that in the actual design. The idea of a floating taskbar works much better for touch, for example. And moving system elements from the bottom to the top is great for tablets. That's kind of what iPad does, that's what Android does. While not really doing anything for desktop users, because, Mac OS and most Linux distros have elements in the top of the screen as well, and that works just fine as desktop design as well. So that's what Microsoft is doing. I think they're just trying to blend everything so that it all works better.
That, and it's also more reminiscent of a smartphone, right?
Yes.
How smartphones look and operate, which again is a familiar user experience. I'm totally on board with this. I think it looks great. Yeah. And I bet I assume the floating taskbar is probably an option. Like, I bet you could dock it and
again, since nothing's set in stone, it's really hard to sort of tell what it's going to be like. My guess, it will be, on tablets it's floating. On desktops you can configure it so it's like connected to the bottom of the screen, and even regardless of what you're doing there, if you maximize an app, it will just connect to the bottom of the screen regardless, because that just makes the most sense. Otherwise there's a lot of wasted UI there.
But I like the time and everything up in the upper right hand corner.
I do like that as well.
I think that looks cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious about notifications, how those are going to work. Is that going to be a swipe from the right? Or...
I'm guessing there'll be a button in the top as well. It's just because, again, these early design concepts, they miss out on things that you would expect to be there.
I think that would be a bad UX.
You think?
Like, I don't want to be reaching to the top right corner for notifications.
Well, you reach to the bottom left or the bottom right now.
Yeah, but that's where my hands are if I'm holding a tablet.
Oh, I guess you're right. Good point. Yeah,
I can literally reach with my thumb.
Oh, I guess for tablets it will still be a swipe out. You can swipe out to get the notification center, and then I guess actual notifications that come in. Yeah, right. Will they be at the bottom or will they be up at the top? I don't know. Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting. Some challenges there, but this again addresses like what you're saying with foldables or scrollables, if we get those, or tablet form factors to make it a little bit more friendly to use. I'm all on board with this, I think, and it makes the idea of a Windows 12 much more interesting, I think. So
yeah, and what wasn't shown in the Ignite keynote, which I could guess sort of tease a little bit here, is that this UI design update or experimentation doesn't just touch the desktop; it touches a lot more areas: File Explorer, Notification Center, lock screen, for example. I've seen lots of examples for those that they're experimenting with internally that may or may not ship as part of the next version of Windows. So it's really interesting to sort of get this really early look at their design sort of ideas and thought process as to what the next version of Windows could look like. It's a real shame that it leaked, because I certainly didn't think I'd be talking about this soon. And I don't think Microsoft did either. But maybe it will positively affect the product. I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, you know what's cool about thinking about this too is now that, Panos is kind of in charge of both, this is really the first time the operating system, and we're talking like the future version of Windows 12, is going to be designed probably with Surface hardware in mind.
Yes.
And I'm talking like a next device, not necessarily Neo. I don't think the Neo is coming back, but maybe some new form factor. Maybe it folds, maybe it's something else like that. But they have to be thinking of building the operating system with their hardware ambitions, especially for a next-gen device that they're going to do in tandem. And I think that's really kind of exciting, because we've never really seen that before. It's gotten closer over the years. There's a lot now. They were working together, starting with the Surface Pro 7. And of course, with Windows 11, I think it got closer. But now Panos is going to real time. I think they all get to kind of really rethink things. I think that's pretty wild.
The other thing I've heard about this design, and again, since this is so early on, like I said, I didn't expect to be talking about this early, only because a lot of things will change between now and then. This UI could look completely different by the time it ships. We just don't know, because nothing's committed to code. Nothing's been agreed upon yet. These are just experimentations. But the one thing I have heard that with this design that we saw at Ignite is the goal of it is so it can be applied across, desktop, laptop, tablets, and foldables, but even Android. Now, that's when I heard that, I thought that was weird. Like, how does that factor in? And I think based on conversations I've had, is I think what the plan is, because we're seeing it with Android 12 Alpha, the Duo now, it's looking a bit more like Windows 11, but it's still certainly an Android device. I think in the future, what we could see, maybe with the Duo 3 or the Duo 4, Android looks like Windows. Microsoft's Android will look like Windows, and the UI won't just be sort of inspired by it, but it will be identical. You'll have the dock along the bottom, the weather in the top left, the time in the top right on Android, and the UX between them is indistinguishable. Because why should they be different? Especially if, for example, the next Duo is foldable like the Galaxy Fold. At that point, it's just a tablet. So why can't it borrow the same Windows tablet UI that they're working on for Next Valley? So those are the questions, and those are the ecosystem ideas that they are talking about internally. And this all ties back to the whole Android org that they put together earlier this year with the plan of treating Android as an extension of the Windows PC, and the Surface Duo is their hero product for that. And listen, it's all coming together. It's all tied together. This is more than just for Windows. It's for Windows, it's for Surface, and it's for Android. And obviously the rest of the Windows PC space, I'm not, don't think this will just be Surface only. That's not what I'm saying. But yeah, it's super interesting time.
Really cool, very exciting. Is there anything else from Ignite you want to talk about, or should we move on?
Well, I should give probably a rundown of the most notable announcements from Ignite, because there was some stuff. So starting with Windows 365, Microsoft is finally launching the Windows 365 app for Windows 10 and Windows 11 in preview. What this app is essentially just a portal to the Windows 365 service. So you can now launch your Windows 365 cloud PCs from the start menu or the taskbar by pinning the Windows 365 app, which is quite nice. They also announced Windows 365 Government, which is a special version of Windows 365 designed for Government Community Cloud and Government Community Cloud High customers in the United States. So that's all fine and dandy. The other thing is they also announced the rebrand of the Office web app for Windows and mobile. So it's now just going to be called the Microsoft 365 app, which is kind of what they've been doing it to Office for a while now. They've been slowly but surely replacing the Office branding with Microsoft 365, and this is the next place where they're doing it. So the actual Office app will now be Microsoft 365 app. And the UI will be mostly the same. They're giving it a few updates. The feed UI will be slightly different and stuff, but the main sort of functionality of their app remains the same. It's a hub to see all of your most recently opened Office documents, and you can create and edit documents through that single app if you want to as well, which is pretty cool. What else happened here? They also announced a new app called Microsoft Places, which isn't out yet. This is just an unveiling. They will sort of roll out and preview later this year or next year, who knows. But this app is designed for optimizing hybrid work environments for, teammates and employees who work in a company or division that is hybrid. Not everybody is in the office these days, and that makes trying to plan meetings and maybe brainstorming sessions and whatnot a lot more difficult, because nobody knows who's going to be in and who isn't going to be in, and whether we need an office or whether we need a meeting room that has hybrid work facilities, or if it's just an office with a table in it. So this app is designed to allow managers and employees to schedule their time in and out of the office, and other teammates and whatnot can see those times that you will be in the office or when you won't be, can give you directions to people within the office. So say if you have your own office on a different floor, you can say, hey, I'm on this floor in this room, and then the app will allow, if you've got your schematics for the building in the app, I guess, will guide you and will be able to take you to that office. So that's pretty cool. Great for big companies like Microsoft, where they have 100 buildings and a campus that's a mile long. And that's a super interesting announcement as well. And I'm sure there were some others. There are lots of Teams announcements as always and whatnot, but we won't dive into that because that's boring.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to the next best thing, which would be the Metaquest Pro. Actually, it's not the next best thing. So just real briefly, Facebook, aka Meta, everybody's going to call it Facebook, had an event, I believe it was on Tuesday, and they announced the Metaquest Pro, which is a revision of the Metaquest 2 that came out 2 years ago, I believe. And this is built more for enterprise, and it's supposed to be the real first metaverse device. Yeah. It's wireless, which is cool, but it's $1,500 and the battery lasts between 1 and 2 hours, which everybody's already calling it dead in the water. Is Facebook Meta too early with this, with a very disappointing technology, not to mention a very disappointing concept of what they think the metaverse is? Zach, what do you think?
I don't know. No, so what I think we should highlight with this headset is that when I saw this headset announced and looking at the device and whatnot, it looks like everything a HoloLens 3 should have been. If you remember Alex Kipman talking about when the HoloLens 2 was announced, what does the future hold for AR, VR? He talked about this idea of a device that can do both AR and VR, a hybrid device, a mixed reality device. And that's what this is. The Metacrest Pro is maybe not the first technically, but it is the first to sort of really put it to the forefront of. It's a device that has both. You can do AR and you can do VR with it, and it works apparently surprisingly well. And how it does it is it does it through cameras. So there isn't a sheet of glass to see into the real world. You see the real world through cameras, but the cameras are supposed to be sort of super instant, so it doesn't feel like you're lagging behind.
This is how Apple's supposed to be doing it.
This is exactly how Apple's supposed to be doing it as well. And this, I think, is certainly a stopgap between that and having just a bit of glass that can project AI can project holograms onto it, but and then obviously shut the glass off eventually as well. But this is a step towards that, and this I think is real competition for the HoloLens device at this point, because HoloLens can only do AR, it can't do the VR aspect of it because it can't shut off the glass. It doesn't. There's nothing to cover it, and the Metacrest Pro also has hand tracking. They've got that nailed now, just like HoloLens does. The Metacrest Pro is there, but more now, and the HoloLens is now lagging behind, and that's a problem, which is also really interesting because Microsoft was also a key announcement at the Facebook event or the Meta event, because they announced that they're bringing Teams and Office and Windows 365 and Xbox Cloud Gaming to the Metaquest and Metaquest Pro. So this it really does throw the future of HoloLens into doubt. Like, what is the plan here for the HoloLens as in the future? Is HoloLens just a division that builds AR and VR apps for other platforms? Or is HoloLens...
And technically it already is, right? Because when they reworked, they broke off the software from the hardware team. And so, there is just a team now that's just dedicated to doing what you're saying. And then the hardware team is supposedly working on the next gen, but we actually don't know since the reorg what their plans are for any of this.
Yeah, so the future HoloLens, I think, certainly been put into doubt with this unveiling of the Metaquest Pro. Samsung is rumored to be doing its own version as well. Apple is supposed to be announcing their thing in January. And what I think Facebook, I keep on the Facebook, what I think Meta really nailed is the price. This thing
really?
is, well, here's what I'll say. It is expensive. It's $1,500 or $1,600. It's not cheap. However, the rumors for the other ones that are supposed to be coming, such as the Apple one, are pitting this over $3,000. So
right.
Technically, if those rumors are true, Facebook has come in half the price almost, which isn't bad. And it's also very much cheaper than the HoloLens, which is now technically a less capable device because of what the Metacrest Pro can do. So they're undercutting a lot of people at this price point, I think, especially for enterprises who were willing to pay $3,000, $4,000 for a thing like this. Now they're only paying $1,500. Well, how does the HoloLens even begin to compete? I don't think it can.
No, it's a good point. I think for consumers, I don't think it's much of an option.
No, not for consumers.
Yeah. But for enterprise and business, possibly. I don't know. And we should also mention that a lot of people who left Microsoft
went to Meta,
partly because of the Alex Kipman stuff, went to Meta. Yeah. And Meta was throwing around a lot of money to lure people over, which they've always done. It's always been a thing up in Seattle where they all also are when it comes to some of the other technologies. Amazon does this too as well. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. I think the metaverse is still kind of an undefined thing, and still the messaging is hard to convince people.
Yeah, I'm not convinced it's ever going to take off in an enterprise way, in ways that these companies want it to. They essentially want it to replace things like Teams and Slack. You exist within VR in Teams and Slack. When you want to use Teams, you just put a VR headset on and then you're using Teams that way. That's kind of what they want. But that's never going to happen, I don't think, because nobody wants to put a headset on until they are quite literally a pair of glasses, which this Metaquest Pro is certainly one of the smaller headsets that we've seen yet. It's still a headset. It's not a pair of glasses. And we are a long way from that. And so I just don't think it's going to take off in the way these companies are hoping in the enterprise space. I do think it honestly has more chance as a consumer product, but the prices need to come down. $1,600 for a mixed reality headset is still too expensive for the majority of people outside of enthusiasts. And for this to catch on as the next sort of stage of computing, we went from desktops to laptops to phones to VR, AR. These need to come down in price. And I think we're still a ways away from that.
Yep. Well, we'll see what happens. Does put Microsoft into an interesting predicament, as you point out. Let's go to the Pixel 7. So the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro began shipping this week. Reviews came out. The reviews are really positive, actually, although it's not perfect. But a lot of people are saying, this is finally the kind of perfect Pixel. I surprisingly put in an order on Sunday for it, and I was going to trade in my Flip 3, which I still have and I'm just not using, for it because I'm lazy. And so I was like, what the heck? We'll see how it is. And as I mentioned earlier, my last Pixel was the Pixel 4. I had the Verizon Blue one, which was kind of fun. And I want to see, obviously things have changed and things have improved, but is it a good phone? And I only went for the 7 and not the Pro because at most this will probably be my secondary phone, right? I'm still going to use Surface Duo as my main phone because it's just really hard once you use Duo to go back to a single screen phone, no matter how good it is. It's just a weird experience. Even just how wide the screens are on Duo, I just like reading more on it. That said, and I also didn't want the Pro because I don't care about Zoom too much. Don't get me wrong, when you're in that situation and you want Zoom, it's awesome to have. But it's something I rarely ever used on any of my devices. Even the Duo, I never use Zoom. I use wide angle, but most of the time I'm just using a normal shot. So I didn't want to pay extra for that. And the Pro's display curves on the edges, which is... I hate that. In fact, when Fisher and I were talking last night on his Spotify Live broadcast, he mentioned how he had issues with it detecting his hand when trying to do a photo and all this. And I was like, I had to mention, I was like, that's exactly why I didn't want the Pro, because of that possibly happening. The 7, however, has a flat display, so you don't get that. It's also, the 7 is slightly smaller. I believe it's 6.3 inch the display versus 6.7. And while it's not a small phone, I preferred something smaller that just fits my hand a little bit better. And I think this did a pretty nice job of that. So hold on. Okay. Sorry, my dog is just giving my cat a little eye. What are you doing? Stop looking at her. So I got the lemongrass version. And hold on, Zach. Can you just hold for a sec? Sorry.
Sure. Well, I didn't buy a Pixel. I was close to buying one, and I decided, no, I just don't think I'm going to use it. Because, again, I'm all in on the Duo. And unlike Dan, I don't have two phones. I don't have two SIM cards or two numbers. I have one phone,
Right.
and it's the Duo. And so if I buy another phone, it's technically a waste of money because I've still got to use the Duo and just have this other phone, which I've just bought without a SIM card in it. So I don't see the point, really.
Yeah. So I was saying where I got the lemongrass version, which it's fine. In terms of the overall experience of it, I would say it's fast. Like I know some people did benchmarks. It's not as fast as like whatever Samsung is using at the moment, but it's very responsive. The display is great. It's only 90 hertz, but that's an improvement from last year's, which was 60 hertz, whereas the Pro is 120 hertz. The cameras are great. The fingerprint reader works. And that was a big complaint last year with the 6, where the fingerprint reader and display was very slow to respond. This one, I've had no issues with it. I still would have preferred maybe one on the back or the power button, but it is what it is. The power button, speaking of, is built for ants. I don't know why they made the power button so tiny, and it's a very tiny and flush button that I don't love. Now, granted, a lot of phones, this one too has raise to wake, and they do have a face recognition now to unlock it if you want, but it's not a very secure face recognition, right? It's just using your image. So it's not, you can technically fool it, unlike how Apple works, but it's kind of convenience. But still, I thought the power button was it's ridiculously smooth. But the build materials and the feel of it, it's very premium. For $599, I'm really impressed with the hardware. But really, and some other reviews pointed this out, what makes it an interesting phone is not the main features. It's sort of all the small things, right? Like the auto transcription feature that it has, the ability for it to ID songs automatically when a device is just. Yeah, and then of course the new photo stuff, right? They have the cinema mode for video, which it's cool. It blurs the background. That's kind of nice. But now they have that new feature, which can unblur photos, existing photos, and not only existing photos, like photos from 10 years ago. Like if they're on your Google thing or whatever, you just import them however you want. You can use this AI to basically unblur, and apparently it's very effective. I haven't tried it yet. I actually do have software that I use on this computer, and now I forgot the name of it actually. What is it called? Oh, Topaz, and they have one denoise, and they have Gigapixel, and then Topaz, whatever this one is, Sharpen AI. And so this actually uses your GPU and AI to do the same thing, but for much larger photos, right? But it's all these small things that make the Pixel 7, I would say, a very enjoyable device. And I think the price is great. And a lot of people are saying this is like basically the best Android phone you can buy right now. I think it depends, obviously. If you like what Samsung's done and you like Samsung's software and features, or you like using a pen, obviously, I think there are some better reasons to get a Samsung device. But in terms of pricing and, the overall quality of this, yeah, I think they finally made a phone that I would keep and use. The Pixel 4 was fine, but I kind of mostly just use it for the camera. I did drop a SIM in it. It's my other SIM, the second one. So, but I need a case for it. It's one of those phones where like you feel like apparently it's pretty rugged, but I don't want to drop it.
Which color did you get?
Lemongrass.
You got a yellow phone, I guess.
It's green. No, it's green.
Is it
green?
It's
a green yellow.
A green
yellow.
Well, if it's not the 1520 yellow, then I don't care.
I kind of don't care about the color either, because I'm going to put a case on it no matter what.
Sure.
So it's going to get covered up with it. So I have a couple of cases coming. But yeah, I just don't trust It's a slippery kind of phone, right? It's all glass on the back. Yeah. It's just like, it doesn't feel secure. So I need grip on my phones. I just don't trust myself. But yeah, I'm not going to review it for the site, but if people have questions, hit me up on Twitter. But I think they did a really nice job for $599. Sure, I think it's a tougher argument for $899 for the Pro. This is the same
Right.
problem that that existed before, which is what the Pro offers worth the $300 difference? And for me, absolutely wasn't, right? Especially with the trade-off with the curved display. But I understand how some people will want a 120 hertz display, will want the better camera system, and a larger display and all that. But for me, that wasn't worth it. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if. Well, I guess I'll continue to use it. It's better than the Flip 3. The Flip 3 is great, but obviously the feature of that phone is it flips. So,
Yeah.
but it's not a great camera or anything like that, so that's fine. All right. The China thing. I just want I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this was so last Friday the United States imposed more sanctions on China, specifically on exports of processor technology to China to build more advanced processors. And apparently, like, if you're a U.S. citizen over there and you're working on these technologies, you can either remain and give up your U.S. citizenship or risk being arrested if you ever go back to the United States, or you're going to have to leave. And so like a lot of Americans, engineers, CEOs, and people who are working these, there's a ton of chip companies in China are apparently leaving, and it's going to severely cripple China's chip ambitions. They're really advanced chips used for military purposes, basically, but also autonomous driving and all this kind of stuff. It's a pretty strict thing. The reason the U.S. is doing it is because, you have Taiwan, and there's this risk that China might invade Taiwan, and that's where TSMC is. TSMC is the foundry that makes the chips for Apple, it makes the chips for Qualcomm, and a lot of other companies. You have Samsung, of course, in South Korea, makes its own chips. I think they also are starting to make chips for other companies too. But if China were to invade Taiwan and we lost TSMC, it would really hurt the world economy, or we don't know, it could really cripple things. So the United States has been trying to decouple itself from its reliance on China in terms of these critical technologies. And so it's one reason why Intel is building a foundry here in the United States. They're building a second one in Israel. It's not only to build Intel chips, but Intel is going to be building chips for other companies doing what TSMC does. So we have this kind of redundancy and this ability to have like homegrown reliance. And the big thing here is the United States designs all these, like a lot of these components, both in the chips themselves as well as the manufacturing tools that are then used by companies like TSMC. And if TSMC, can't get certain things, it could hamper restrictions. But it's unfair competition in the wider sense that not only is the United States like ahead in terms of design and where it is with these processors, but now they're trying to literally cripple China's ability to even try to compete. And a lot of people are saying that this is going to really do some damage to China's chip ambitions to build super chips. And some of this previous strategy was used with Huawei a couple of years ago, and it devastated Huawei. Huawei was like the top phone manufacturer. I had gone out to China to visit their campus. Like, they were just this monolith company that was just so massive and just going into everything. And they're doing really amazing technology. And now they're kind of, they're nowhere to be seen because they can't use their chips and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. This is a really interesting escalation of trade things between China and the United States. So we'll kind of see what happens there.
Yeah, I have nothing more to add.
Fair enough. Do we? How long are we here?
We are an hour and a half, pretty much. Just
all
about.
Right. I'll cover reviews next week because I don't want to make this a longer podcast, and it needs to be. I think 90 minutes is good. But we had some reviews going up this week, including go read the 4090 GeForce review, as I think that's worth your time definitely. But we'll cover more next week. Zach, you have a thing of the week?
No, I've literally had no time to do anything other than work this week, so sadly not.
My thing of the week was because of the Amazon Prime stuff. I bought more Govee equipment to make my TV downstairs just a discotheque. So I bought these bar lights that were on sale And I do have 2 reviews coming from Govee regarding strip lights and the new TV backlighting system, which uses 2 cameras to give even better color representation. So that's a weekend project. I also bought, my thing of the week is the Eufy's new doorbell, which it came out months ago, but I've already have the Eufy 2K, and this was not a huge upgrade, but they came out with the dual doorbell. And so it's got 2 cameras. One, it's a 2K camera that faces outwards, just like a regular video doorbell. But there's a secondary, I believe, full HD camera that faces downward or downward at an angle. And it then combines it in the app, although there'll be like a little line. And like you can see this like massively tall photo. But the point of it is to see any packages that have been delivered on your doorstep, which is a very specific use case. But obviously, I get a lot of packages, and I think it's just a crazy idea. It's like, wow, that's really amazing. I've talked about this on the podcast. I have Ring for some security, and I'm moving away from it to Eufy. I already have a lot of Eufy cameras around the house and sensors. And they just make really cool stuff. There's same thing with Govee, and this is again gets back to the China thing, right? Both of these companies, I believe, are Chinese. I don't know if Eufy's owned by Anchor, and I don't know if they're Hong Kong or Taiwan, but they're not American. They're just doing things like Govee has like 6,000 different types of accessories that you can buy for your house. It's really hard to keep track of, but like there's just an option for everything. Like they even make we have recessed lighting here because it's a new house. And so it's the one, that goes in there. They make RGB lighting to replace those, which is like insane. So I could like replace those in my house. I could just make them white or whatever color I want, but I could also make them flicker on and off in blue and green. I don't know. The options are unlimited. It's a fun technology. If I would pay attention to Black Friday coming out. Obviously, this stuff will be on sale again, but I would look into this if you're looking to get into home security or smart home stuff. I think both companies do, and they have nice apps too, just do really cool stuff. So that is my thing of the week. All right, we'll do some Q&A now with the audience. If you're listening to this recorded, of course, you don't get to hear that, but we do record this every Friday live at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on our YouTube channel at Windows Central, where we also have a live chat going on that you're free to join in. You can also go watch the video at YouTube for previous broadcasts. Follow me at Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino. Follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. If you have any questions that you would like to ask us, as always, thanks for listening in. Take care, everyone.
There we go. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them in the chat. We'll hang around for a bit and do our best to answer them. I am so ready for the weekend. Oh, I did see a few questions about Volterra. We should have mentioned that in the podcast. Oh, well. Yeah, Volterra wasn't at the event. I never kind of thought it would be in the actual event itself, but I definitely thought that they would announce availability for it alongside the other services in the sort of blog post that they did for the event. But they didn't. However, according to Panos Panay himself, the Volterra is very imminent. It should be very soon. He didn't give an exact time frame, but I believe it's supposed to be either this month or next month. Yeah, it is certainly on the heels of the new Surface stuff. Depending on when it gets released, will the next version of Windows Server be part of the Windows 11 family, or will it be part of the new Windows 12 family? That is a great question, and I think the answer is neither. What is the next version of the server? Is it 2023 or 2024?
What was the question?
I'm just asking in general. You won't know the answer.
Oh, okay.
If it's 2024, then I think actually it could be based on the same platform release as Windows client. But if it's 2023, then it won't be. It'll be based on some 2023 release of the Windows platform, which will be newer than Windows 11, definitely, but it won't be whatever Windows 12 ends up being based on. Do you think that there will be a phone with a phone OS and full PC OS also? For example, iOS plus macOS, Android plus Windows. I think it's more likely to happen on the Windows plus Android side. I definitely think the Microsoft could do a Surface Duo in the future, which has Android on it when you're using it as a phone, and then when you dock it up to a monitor, it boots into Windows. I think that's certainly a possibility. And if I'd have to vote on which company's going to do that, I would say it would be Microsoft over Apple. But I don't think it's going to happen, only because that setup, that use case, only works if you have the perfect setup for it, which most people don't. Most people already have a laptop or a monitor connected to a PC. No one really just has a monitor, disconnected from anything, So yeah, I don't think it's a nice idea on paper. It makes sense, but in reality, I just don't think it does. So.
Daniel Rubino, I fell down the G-Shock rabbit hole because of you. I nearly bought a GW 5000U. It's only a matter of time before I cave. That's a great watch. It's a great starter watch for the G-Shocks. I mean, it's more than a starter watch, right? That's a little bit more on the pricey end, but that's a really cool one. If you really want to get into it, look up Shop Japan, I believe it's called, because a lot of shopping in Japan. I think that's it. Yeah, shopping in Japan. Look that site up, and so in Japan they make like a whole bunch of other G-Shocks and limited edition ones, and they have a J ending and stuff. And you can go there and check those out. But yeah, congratulations. Who the target buyers of Surface Pro 9 5G? Taking the price into account, seems like Microsoft is targeting C-level executives only. Yeah, $1299 that's where the ThinkPad X13S lives in terms of pricing. Surface is always a premium brand, and it's not priced competitively. It never will be. Who is it for? I mean, Microsoft does have a lot of partners in business who will want these devices. Would it be upper management, middle management type? Yeah, probably. But, the Surface Pro 8 with 5G or 4G wasn't cheap either. So, again, I don't think they really worry about pricing too much because they're hoping their partners pick up that slack to be a little bit more competitive. But I would say the target audience who does buy these devices with 5G make a little bit more bread than the average person. Because a company is one thing, but if you're an individual, you have to have a data plan, right?
Yeah.
And in the US, a data only plan, you can get one for $15 a month, like through Boost Mobile. No, that doesn't work though. That didn't work with my PC. But you can like Mint, you could do it like $15 a month, but you would have to pay a year in advance to get that rate. So most people don't have they want to spend an extra $15 a month for a data sim that they're going to use occasionally, right? So I think it's already it's priced higher. But ARM devices have always been priced around this, but it's coming with a specific spec, don't forget, and stuff like that. So it is what it is.
A couple questions asking about the Duo 3. Are you going to write about the Duo 3 now that the Surface event is over? And somebody else is asking if you know anything about whether or not the pen will be integrated and if the camera bump will be fixed or redesigned. I will write about the Duo 3 at some point. That it will certainly a plan. I do have info on it. I probably have enough now to do an article, but I do want to wait because there's still moving parts that I don't want to be wrong about. Secondly, will the device have an integrated pen? The answer is no. And will the camera bump be fixed? I don't know what you mean by fixed, but if you're asking whether or not it'll be smaller, the answer is also no. So there you are.
Well, I think it depends on the technologies, but yeah.
It will be redesigned. It's the camera bump will not look the same as what it is on the Duo 2.
You can only make it so thin while keeping a device super thin. Yeah. And there's no way to integrate the pen into the chassis. Even Samsung can't do that.
They can't even integrate the cameras.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So there's just not enough space in these devices to do that kind of thing. And especially the pen is an optional thing anyway that they would like to keep optional. Because that if they didn't say it's integrated, right, then you have to basically sell the device with the pen. That's going to bump up the price. And how many people are going to necessarily use the pen? Yeah, not a lot. I don't think so.
Somebody.
Hey, Dan, Zach.
Sorry, go on.
Hey Dan, Zach, would you know what would be a comparable, better spec all-in-one PC than the Surface Studio? I was going to pick that Studio up, but I was underwhelmed by it, unfortunately. I have the perfect answer for you. It is the HP NV34.
Yes.
In fact, I just got the HP 34, which is the business version. It's basically the same device. It just it could run dual cameras at the same time, which is pretty wild. And these cameras can be positioned all around the frame, so you can have one looking at you while also looking down on your desk for collaboration. And it has like the Wolf security stuff. But the HP NV34 has just been upgraded to 12th gen, and that's like a desktop CPU, and you can get it up to a 3060 GPU, which is nice. It's really nice. But what's kind of cool about it too is on the back is a plate, and you just lift it off because it's magnetic, and you have full access to, I believe, the dual SSD drives for replacement, as well as the onboard RAM, which can go up to 128 gigs with DDR5. And so you can just buy a lower spec that you're happy with right now. But yeah, you just pull this panel off, slap some more RAM in there, or just unscrew the storage. It's simple. It has a ton of ports, including all Thunderbolt 4. It's got a couple of Thunderbolt 4s on the back. They even put ports in the stand. So you have, I believe, a Type-C and 2 Type-A and a SD card slot in the stand itself, so you don't need to reach around behind the computer if you need to plug in something really quickly. And the stand itself has a Qi wireless charger built in, so you can just drop your phone on there while charging it. The display is a wide screen. It's 5K resolution with, I believe, anti-reflective or I believe it's anti-reflective layer. It's non-touch. It does have a 16 megapixel camera, but it's actually 4 megapixel because it's 4 megapixel binning with Windows Hello built in. It comes with the keyboard and mouse, which are wireless and are paired automatically out of the box, and there's no dongle for it, so you keep all your ports. It's a really, really, and it has 4 speakers built in, all with discrete amplifiers. It's a sick all-in-one. If you don't need a touchscreen, you don't need to draw, I don't think there's nothing on the market like this thing. It's really awesome. So yeah. HP NV34.
Would you expect Next Valley to have the classic layout, for example, the UI that is in Windows 11 available? Do you also expect Windows 12 to have some sort of dashboard/start screen for the touch devices? So to answer that second question, I do not think there'll be a start screen. I still think it'll be an app launcher, just like every other platform that exists today. Secondly, that first point, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it returns to a more traditional sort of layout if you're using it on a device without touch, for sure. But I don't know. I don't even think Microsoft knows. We are so far away from anything being, committed to code that we just don't know what this product's going to properly be like until maybe in a year from now, once they start working. Well, they'll start working on it but I think they're probably going to start working on it imminently. But I would. At this point, I can't give you an answer because I don't even think Microsoft can give you an answer. We'll have to wait and see. I will say that this new Microsoft, the new leadership for the Windows team, certainly favor pushing to the future rather than hanging on to the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't an option, because you don't get that. That doesn't happen on Android and iOS and Mac OS and iPad OS. They don't release a new version and go, oh, by the way, there is an option to go back to the old UI if you want. They don't do that. They just say, here's the new UI. You like it or you don't. We don't care. So I think Microsoft may take a similar approach.
I hope I pronounced that right. How much better is Surface 9 than Surface Pro 8? Aside from the ports, buttons, placements, what's the main difference? So I did share an article in comments that we have an article written on that compares them directly. But to kind of summarize, the processor is different. You can go from quad core to 10 cores. And I don't want to, it's a big difference in terms of performance. It really you literally feel it. Like it's going to be a very fast and responsive device. So you're going to get better performance. You should get similar battery life, but we haven't tested that, so we don't know. The display has been improved. We haven't tested it for color accuracy, but it's supposed to be like 100% DCI-P3, I believe, or at least sRGB. I'll be measuring that when I do the review. And it does HDR now, which is Dolby Vision HDR, I should say. So it's going to be better for movies. And it comes in different colors, obviously. And Yeah, I think that's kind of about it, to be honest. The Pro 9 itself is not radically different outside of moving some ports around, as you said, and putting the buttons on top. But I don't think I'm missing this. Speakers should be the same. I mean, everything's tweaked up a little bit, so everything should be a little bit better. But that's going to be the main difference. It'll be the performance, the color options, and the display is supposed to be much better.
Somebody was asking what the deal is with that floating taskbar. We talked about it in the podcast. That is a design experiment or exploration for the next version of Windows. It may not happen. It might, but it's certainly something they are looking into and are considering for the next version. I highly doubt it will ship as a Windows 11 feature.
Is there any chance that Microsoft would announce Surface Pro 9 Intel with 5G in the nearest future? IT pros would definitely appreciate that. Yeah, I get the need for it. It's a good question. I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either, because I don't think the demand is necessarily going to be there.
Every time they've announced a new version of the Surface Pro, they've always announced all the SKUs that will be available at some point. You know, remember when they did the Pro 5 LTE? They announced that on the same day as the Pro 5, but that wasn't available for 6 more months.
Yeah.
So we would have heard about it if that was going to be a thing. It's not a thing. It might be for the Pro 10. I think maybe they're just keeping 5G to the ARM version just to make it more special this year. But once, once we get to the Nvidia chips and once performance is on par with the Intel version, then I think they can go back to sharing cellular across the processors.
Any news about Microsoft Loop Workspaces app? I have no idea what that is, Zach.
Not to my knowledge. Someone's asking if Microsoft Loop is already out. No, it's out in private preview, so I think you need to be invited to be able to use it, but it's not available publicly.
Trade-in program, where are we at? I want to buy a Surface Studio laptop, but not if they will just upgrade it in a year and I have to pay full price and sell the older gen. So I believe, Zach can correct me if I'm wrong, we're expecting a refresh likely in the spring, which I think would make sense. It will probably go to 12th gen, maybe 13th gen, but probably 12th gen. But that's okay. There's not a massive difference between the 12 and the 13th gen. It's the same architecture, but you would get more cores. So the performance will be even better, but I'm not sure how much better it will be. So we have to test that. But you have to understand, like the Laptop Studio, just like Surface Book, I believe it was more on an 18-month upgrade cycle versus the 12-month upgrade cycle of Laptop and Pro. Right. So they take your time a little bit more. And so a spring release would be that 18-month time frame.
I will say the ongoing component shortage really makes it hard to pinpoint when Surfaces are going to launch now. Originally, the plan was to ship in the spring, but because of the component shortage, that may have been pushed back to the fall of next year. So we just don't know. But 2023 for the next Surface Laptop Studio is likely. And whether there's a trade-in program? No, there's no trade-in program. There is a trade-in service, but it's not very good.
But it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, your best bet would be to go to Best Buy if you're in the United States. Mm. You skipped through my question. Sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, please include.
There's a lot of questions coming.
Yeah.
Will Microsoft implement a continuum-like feature for Surface Duo 3? Samsung already has DeX. No.
I just answered that. So there will be a cloud-based version, Windows 365 powered. When you connect a Duo to a monitor, you'll be able to log in to a Windows 365 PC and use Windows through there. But there will not be a native Android-based thing.
Because no one will use that.
Exactly.
And no one uses DeX.
Yep.
Surface Go 4, what changes do you think will come with that?
It will have 2 screens. No, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, do you think they'll switch to ARM for that?
So I did hear the next Surface Go is supposed to have an ARM option. It's supposed to be a 7C for the entry level, and then I think the Intel model will stick around for the higher tier. But again, the component shortage, I just don't know when these are coming anymore and if anything has changed. But the last time I heard is the Surface Go 4 is supposed to have a Snapdragon 7C based chip in it.
Is the ARM strategy for Microsoft different than Apple's? Yes. In the sense, it just is. In the sense that they will continue to have x86 and ARM for different audiences, such as mobile and desk workers, or is it just a transition period? Now, your first idea was the correct one. x86 is forever going to exist next to Windows. Microsoft doesn't have the luxury of Apple, which controls the hardware and software. So Apple can just snap their fingers back. We're switching to ARM. Here it is. And you x86 developers, you got to switch over. They can do that. Microsoft can't. They have legacy users. clearly ARM is not there yet. Like, I don't know how would you, there's no ARM processor that can compete with a 12th gen 45 watt H series, let alone the HX series, right? It's not even close. Maybe someday when if ARM gets that powerful, but Intel is not an x86, and AMD aren't, sitting targets, right? They're constantly moving and innovating as well. But for legacy reasons, you're always going to see support for both to meet different markets, right? ARM right now is primarily used for information workers who need to be mobile. It's not typically for your average consumer, although if you want to use it, you're more than glad to. But that's where you see these devices more or less positioned at right now, and I think that makes sense.
Somebody asking thoughts on the future design of Surface Laptop Studio, Studio Laptop, and Duo. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows? The problem that I've found is you can't take a look at one new Surface and think that that's the design that they're going to go for all of them. Like you mentioned the Pro 9's design, and you think, yeah, it's a bit rounded, blah, blah, the thinner bezels and whatnot. They're different design teams. Like, they literally design them differently. For example, the Pro 9 doesn't have rounded corners in its display. The Laptop Studio does. The Surface Laptop doesn't. And that's all because they make these decisions. It's not like they forgot. They make these decisions. They go, actually, no, we don't want rounded corners on the Pro 9. Whereas the Laptop Studio team go, actually, yes, we want rounded corners on that. The Laptop Go team were like, yes, rounded corners, great idea. So you can't look at one product line and go, that's the design they're all going to go for in the future, because that's not how it works. But I do expect the next Surface Studio, if there is one, will be different, have a new design. I don't know about the next Surface laptop. You just never know with that. The next Surface Duo, I understand, will have a radically different design. Surface Go, probably not too different from the Go 3. The bigger changes would be on the inside. And Laptop Go 2, I think, is supposed to have a new design. Laptop Go 3, sorry. But who knows at this point? That's way far out, so don't want to talk about it yet.
Hope Microsoft gives you both Pro 9 variants so you can benchmark the two processors and give a relative difference for performance and also battery. I can actually kind of already guesstimate this, right? So I could tell you the ARM version is, because I already have a device with the Snapdragon 8CX Gen 3. It feels like an 11th gen Core i5 U series processor for normal stuff, but it's even more powerful for multi-core. It's as powerful as a Core i7 H series 11th gen. Can it compete against a 12th gen? No. The 12th gen is going to blow it away in terms of performance. I don't think, but it's not going to be like bad. I'm like I said, 11th gen Core i5 is really nice to be able to use. Especially with that extra battery life, which I would estimate would be a couple extra hours, which doesn't sound like a ton, but an extra 2 to 3 hours, if you can get that, actually makes a big difference in daily work for people. So I think it'll be really nice. Well, will Microsoft Designer be part of Microsoft 365? Yes, I believe it's already been announced. It's part of Microsoft 365.
Do you think consumers will be aware of the limitations of the ARM platform when buying the Surface Pro 9 and 5G? The Pro X wasn't exactly promoted clearly as an ARM product either, but 5G versus no 5G question.
I actually asked this question, and I'll put it into, I got to do a write-up on some stuff. I asked this question specifically, and the short answer is no. First of all, you got to think about, who's using this device, right? So I was talking even like to Michael Fisher last night, and, he's talking about even with the Intel version, he's like, oh, video editing, what have you. I'm like, whoa, stop. Like most people buying the Pro 9 aren't video editing. Maybe once in a while they are, and it could do it. It's just not. But if your job is a video editor, and you bought a Pro 9, congratulations, you bought the wrong device. These devices are aimed at a specific market, which are, like I said, are kind of information workers, people who like to draw, creators, people who collaborate. But the thing is, people have this in the head that there's a lot of limitations to ARM. There really isn't. The SQ3, the ACX Gen 3, is at a performance level. So you have Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom are native ARM now. We didn't even mention the Xbox app is ARM native now as well. So you can already run those native ARM. But I don't even do that. I run Elements, Adobe Elements, but it's emulated. And so I have no issue running, Sorry, we're trying to get rid of another spammer again. Okay, you got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I'll report them. What was I going to say? You can already. So I run Adobe Elements. I've had no problem with it. Like it runs. It feels like a normal app to me. I edit my photos. End of the day. So there's no more like you go to launch an app and a window comes up and it's like, oh, that doesn't work. Could you find an example of that? I'm sure you could. Gaming is usually the thing where you're going to run into that. But are you buying the Surface Pro 9 5G so you can game on it as your primary function? Like, what you should be doing is buying, if you want a game, you use the new Xbox app, which has been rewritten for ARM64, and use cloud streaming, and then you can play like Destiny 2 on your Surface Pro 9 5G with a controller, and you'd be happy as pie. I would do that. But those are really kind of the only main limits. I like I said, there's no app I've been running that's like, blink, oh, sorry, you can't do that. And I think people have that in their head, that there are these weird limitations. It's just not. There aren't any. Everything pretty much runs now. And they're pretty confident in that they won't have that issue.
All right, a couple more questions, then I do need to head off. So get them in now.
Is Microsoft's SQ3 processor faster than the stock ATX Gen 3? We'll find out. Typically, yes. Microsoft hasn't fibbed. Their chips are typically faster than the stock Qualcomm's. Is it significantly faster is the question we need to answer. It's hard to say. It's not going to make a night and day difference. You will get, I bet, slightly higher scores on the benchmarks. It'll be slightly more responsive. Which is nice. They're squeezing more out of the chip than other devices. It's not a huge difference, though. I would say that's what to expect. But we'll see with the benchmarks. Oh, y'all forgot about the new Xbox device and one of Phil Spencer's tweet. We did.
Well, there wasn't much to say.
It's an old prototype of a device that we have been expecting them to do. So we'll see what happens. Are we expecting the new laptop Go to be ARM, or are they sticking with premium? We kind of answered that already. Zach was saying that the Surface Go will have an ARM variants, probably for the entry level will be ARM, the 7C, and then go with Intel for the higher ends. I don't know with laptop Go what the plans are. I don't know if Zach's
right. I don't think it'll be ARM for the laptop Go.
Zach, there's a question about headphones. Are they to be determined or dead? I think they're to be determined, right? They're going to be kind of relaunched with maybe next fall.
Earbuds, certainly. I'm not too sure about Surface headphones. Yeah, I don't know about Surface headphones, but Surface earbuds, I am told that there is a next gen that they have. Well, next gen, they have a version 2. They were supposed to come out at the end of this year. Well, with the other Surfaces just announced, but then they didn't do that. So I'm not too sure where they're supposed to pop up now. My guess is they will wait for the next Surface Duo and announce them as a pair. But, yeah, we just don't know. When will Microsoft restore the top position of the taskbar? Oh, that's something else I wanted to mention as well. One of the reasons why Microsoft hasn't done that is because of this Windows 12 thing that they're working on. If you've seen it, we've actually talked about it. They want to put stuff at the top of the screen, and that's why you're not allowed to move the taskbar up there anymore, because they're preparing for that. And so the answer to your question is no. They will not be restoring the ability to position the taskbar.
There you go. Mystery solved.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
All right. That's probably going to be it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time. Bye.